Good morning and thanks for being with us. Welcome to the Russian invasion, our special coverage of the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. First, the headlines. United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly votes to reprimand Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Russian troops take control of Kherson, Ukraine's major port city. Plus, Russia and Belarus are banned from 2022 Paralympic Games in Beijing, China. As dawn breaks on the 8th day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, here are the updates from over the night. Russian forces have seized control of the key southern port city of Kherson, and that's according to its mayor. It's the first major Ukrainian city to be taken since the invasion began. Loud explosions have been shaking Kiev and other cities, with footage showing a huge fireball lighting up the night sky in the capital. President Volodymyr Zelensky released a late-night video praising the courage of citizens in defending their country. And as I said just now, the mayor of the key port city had said Russian forces have seized control of Kherson. Mayor Igor Kolokev said Russian troops had forced their way into the city council building and imposed a curfew on the residents. Kherson is the first major city to be taken by Russia after heavy fighting since it invaded a week ago. Several cities have come under intense shelling, with Wednesday being one of the most destructive days of the fighting. What you're about to see on your screen is footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry yesterday of military helicopters supporting its troops during what Moscow described as a special operation in Ukraine. The Kremlin said the Russian officials are ready to hold a second round of peace talks with Ukraine today, adding that it is unclear whether Ukrainian officials would turn up. Ukrainian President Zelensky had said on Tuesday that Russia must stop bombing Ukrainian cities before more talks could take place on Russia's invasion of his country. In New York, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution deploring in the strongest terms what it describes as the aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine in violation of its charter. The UN is now demanding that Russia immediately cease its use of force against the Eastern European country. At an emergency session of the General Assembly on Wednesday, 141 member states voted in favor of the resolution, which required a two-thirds majority to pass, while 5 voted against and 35 abstained. Well, Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations is lauding Wednesday's vote, saying it is a powerful message being sent to Russia after the UN censured Moscow for its invasion. Speaking after the vote, the ambassador expressed his country's gratitude. And in a sign that Russia's central bank is trying to stop people from selling their rubles, it has reportedly made it more expensive for individuals to buy foreign currencies. Reuters reports that it has imposed a 30% commission on such purchases on currency exchanges. Yesterday, President Vladimir Putin announced emergency measures to try and prop up the Russian ruble, including banning Russians from transferring money abroad after the currency crashed to a record low. In recent days, many ordinary Russians have been racing to withdraw cash. Okay, let's take a look at some of what's been happening and some of the stories that we've reported. I'm being joined now by Temitope Olodo, who is a security analyst. He joins us from the British capital, London. Good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Does it surprise you the turn of events with the Russians actually seizing Kherson, which is the first that they have done since this invasion came up about 8 days ago now?
I wasn't quite surprised. The Russians were meant to have entered into the capital a long time ago, at least within 72 hours. But Putin actually underestimated the Ukrainians, and that's why they've returned back to their old methodology of warfare, which is to surround the city and actually start, stuffing the city. And I think that's exactly what they've done. If you notice, the Ukrainians do not have enough military might, to protect the whole country. So what they've done is put their military in all the major cities. And what the Russians are doing now is actually going after those cities, and at least now they've taken one. But I think our concerns now is with the way in which the Russians are going in terms of the brutality of their approach, of their invasion. The fact is that there might be a lot of casualty, and we've seen that already, even with the Indians and the Chinese, who more or less, ironically, supported, or more or less were playing a balanced approach, in the United Nations when it came to the voting, and they're the ones that have lost their citizens in this whole saga that is ongoing.
The other thing, of course, is that, as you said, probably, and some people have said that already, that Russia anticipated that this was going to be a very short war, wouldn't take so long, and the resistance from the Ukrainians has meant that they needed to alter, as you pointed out, the plan. But there are peace talks going on, even though the Ukrainian president has said that, they won't be attending any more talks except Russia stops bombing their cities. That hasn't happened from all the reports that we have heard, but the preparation for talks are still on. So how much do you think this kind of talks can achieve given the situation militarily on the ground?
It's going to be quite difficult because the challenge we have here is that both parties, especially the president of Ukraine and Russia, have a different perspective of how things should move forward. The Russians believe that he's pro-West, and for that reason, it will not be to the national interest of the Russians, while he himself does not want to move along the side of the Russians. So we have a serious situation here. Now, there is nobody is going to win this because unfortunately, we're in a situation where the Ukrainians, are digged in and they started giving weapons to their citizens. So even if the Russians, with their military might, are able to occupy some parts of the country, they're still going to have difficulty ruling or doing it. And I don't think they want to rule. What they want is to have a proxy person that is pro-Russian imposed. And I don't see how they're going to achieve that. So the only solution is, from what we could see from the map, is that they are trying as much as possible using this period of the peace negotiation or the meetings to actually win as much territory as they could in the southern part of Ukraine so that they could annex that. And I don't see the Western countries allowing that to do that, allow them to do that. So we are in a difficult situation. And it's also going to be difficult for NATO to enter now and say, okay, we don't want any flying zone, no flying zone, because at the end of the day, the Russians are already on ground and they have their batteries and anti-aircraft missiles there. So it's going to turn into a third world war if we are not careful. And that's the reason why, the Western countries are trying to see if they could broker a deal. And let's just pray that maybe with everybody putting pressure on Russia, they might just back down a little bit, but it's going to be a difficult one.
Some of the people I've spoken to have said that things like this are always about compromise, and that, let me put it again, the way it was put to me, which is that the West goaded Zelensky, President Zelensky of the Ukraine, to poke in the eye of President Putin. And now that the bear, as President Putin was called, has reacted, those who goaded President Zelensky are offering aid from a distance. None of them is prepared to put troops on the ground, and that therefore it's inevitable that the Russians, as you have just said, are going to take over. The kind of takeover they're going to have is what is being probably negotiated. Is that a fair argument? Is that proper analysis?
I think both parties need to save face. And the only way we could save face is, for example, we know that this issue is being escalated by the hour, because with the Ukrainian president going to European Union and saying, you know what, you need to take us in, we need to become part of European Union. If they accept that proposition, then that would actually make Russia actually even more angry, because that is what it doesn't want. So the good thing is that NATO is saying we are not going to get involved. And I think that the fact that they are saying it publicly that we're not going to get involved might be an opportunity for Russia to back down a bit and say, okay, they're not going to create a border, from Ukraine. That might be one of the compromises, but they can't come out publicly. And maybe if one of the NATO countries should come out and say, you know what, Ukraine will not be part of NATO. They will not be part of NATO. That might actually help. But I don't see NATO as a body coming out publicly, because they need to save face to say Ukraine will not be part of us, because they're saying it's left to Ukraine and whatever. But that is where the problem is now. I think a lot of countries need to get involved. They need to say, okay, let's have a ceasefire, let's create a corridor, because that might be the only solution now, to say, okay, both parties ceasefire, let's create a corridor for humanitarian, assistance. And that might help to bring down the tension. But to say that, okay, Ukraine, you need to stop being member of NATO, or you need to, have an exchange, change your president, I don't see how the Ukrainians will agree to that now, because there's a lot at stake.
Well, even beyond the current crisis, there's also the issue, because it got lost in all the narratives about what was going on the ground, but there was also the warning issued by Russia to Finland, and I believe it was, there was another country, the name escapes me at the moment, saying that, look, they also had kind of indicated a desire at some point to join either NATO or the EU, and that they should be on alert that Russia would not accept that. So let's look at the broad regional context of all of this.
Yeah.
There are some countries already in that region that are members of the EU and that are members of NATO. Russia did not raise much hackles at the time, or if it did, it was not prepared to go to war over them. But it seems as if it is indicating now that it has drawn a line beyond which anybody who crosses will face what Ukraine is facing now. Militarily, is there a strategy to all of this?
There is a strategy, and I think Putin has has withdrawn the strategy. But I think, to be fair on Putin, nobody wants wants the West behind at their backyard, and that is why he doesn't want that military might at his backyard. And whichever way we want to look at it, nobody will want somebody, even in our country where we are now, if we know that there is, another superpower that is coming to build block of, powers around us, to suffocate us, we're going to raise concern. And I think that is why he's drawing the red line. But unfortunately, the West are very good in drawing red lines, but they are very good in withdrawing back, because we know from history that Ukraine had nuclear weapons, and they gave them up, and they signed an agreement to say that Britain, America, and other countries, will support them, to prevent them from being attacked. But look at what is happening. And we know that Libya had a similar deja vu. He gave out his weapon, or he agreed not to proceed, and afterwards, things happen. So the dynamics is always changing. And what we see now is that Putin is now putting his feet down to say, you know what, all these other countries you can't join. Maybe they were at a weaker position at that point, and those countries were able to join. But now I don't see Putin or Russia allowing other countries to join NATO now. And I think this is where we're going to have the real security challenge, the world global security challenge now, because it's not going to just be the Thailand issue. It's not just going to be the Afghanistan issue anymore. I think this is where the Cold War is going to be. And we need to find a gentleman agreement or a global agreement to try and resolve this issue.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about has to do with what the West is doing, which it describes as maximum pressure. It's trying to economically strangulate Russia into submission and withdrawal from Ukraine. But Russia also has some levers that it can pull. In the first place, some of the sanctions are very targeted. They are not sanctions that are targeted against items or issues that could affect the West. For example, they haven't said the gas should be turned off yet, but Vladimir Putin can turn it off himself. And if that happens, there are those who have said that the crisis will assume again a different dimension, especially in countries that have large aging populations that require heat, and then given the weather conditions in some of those places, that would be different. But do you think as a strategy, as a security strategy, this economic sanctions designed to slowly strangulate the Russian economy will bring any kind of break to President Putin's broad strategy, which we have already discussed?
Unfortunately, Russia is not running the kind of democracy that we run in the West. So he's able to get away with a lot of things. And it's not like, Libya or Syria, where, they could still bully him. He still has a war chest, and he will puff and puff. But like you rightly said, we that live in Europe at the moment, we're watching our gas and watching our heaters, because everything is just going. So we have to wear many jackets, to keep ourselves alive. So if he decides to turn it off, and remember, there are so many countries that could still buy gas from Russia. And so Russia at the moment can still get away with a lot of things. But let's not kid ourselves. They are squeezing Russia, to the extreme. And this guy could do anything. And they could say, you know what, okay, if this is the way you want to go, let me just shut down this thing for at least one week, or for even 3 days as a warning shot. And then they will have to come to negotiating table. For me, I believe there needs to be a compromise. And the compromise is, maybe they will just say, let's create a corridor, a humanitarian corridor, let's cease fire, let's all go and have a talk for 1 week. And that might save face for Russia, save face for Ukraine. And then at the end of the day, they will have a gentleman agreement that Ukraine will not join NATO. Because as far as this is concerned, Ukraine must not join NATO. And I don't see NATO going down or putting boots on the ground in Ukraine, to try and stop Russia, because this is going to be really bloody. The bottom line is that Russia is already bringing out some weapons that they should not even be using. So that automatically explains to our viewers that this guy is a no nonsense person, and is willing to go the long rope, and is willing to silence opposition within Russia on this matter. If it was in the UK, they would have shut down parliament. If UK is using those kind of weapons, or doing things that a lot of people are not happy with, who is going to do that in Russia? Nobody.
Thank you very, 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 very much for your thoughts on the program this morning. We'll, of course, keep an eye on this, and at a point, we'll come back to you again to update ourselves on if there is a change of strategy and what is happening in the Western capitals there on another occasion. But thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break at this point in time. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at some of those issues that we raised there in terms of business and the economic reactions. Please stay on with us. Thank Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. And as I did say before the break, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has impact everywhere. We did talk before that discussion with Timmy Tokwe in London about the situation with the ruble and the fact that Russians are now paying 30% commission. They have to pay 30% commission on accessing foreign currency. But there are other impacts, and for that, Ine John McQuarrie joins me today like she did yesterday. Hi, Ine.
Good morning.
Now, let's start with oil prices.
Yes. Well, do you know yesterday night, at about, I think, 10 p.m. or so, oil was about 114 dollars. This morning it's 116. You know, so that's within how many hours you have $2 added to oil prices. I mean, that's good news for investors. You know, if you're
Especially those who are invested in oil companies
exactly.
and
So
all the
it's good
support
news.
infrastructure.
Yes, but of course not very good news for the world because it just means that everything goes up. And then the news that perhaps Russia has taken hold of the Black Sea ports, you know, that obviously creates another disruption in the supply chain and increases the prices, not just of oil, but of almost all commodities, because people are looking for where to go to. Russia, incidentally, things like palladium and aluminium, they are very major producers of it. So the price of these commodities is just really high up there at this time, and supply has obviously reduced. So that means that the world is scrambling to, you know, just
get whatever it is.
Limited market, and of course these are not good times at all for the world. But Russia is also feeling the impact, because even though I heard you were discussing with your last guests, you know, that sanctions seem not to be touching what will affect the Western world, like oil and gas. But the world knows. Yesterday we saw that global oil prices went up about 40%. Because everybody knows that, I mean, Putin can wake up and just put off the tap, and then there'll be no energy, no gas, and all that. But other than that, we see that a lot of private corporation, BP and all that, are boycotting Russian gas, Russian oil, you know, in their own little way, even in the aviation sector. Airbus and one other company, they do maintenance of aircraft. They have said they will not provide services, you know, to Russian planes anymore. So apparently, of course, this is all to put them under pressure to call for peace. So a whole lot is happening, you know,
Of course,
along that
I
line.
do also know that even here at home in Nigeria, we're having difficulties with, because when you mentioned Airbus and so on,
Yes.
the aviation sector is, a lot of the airlines here are looking for aviation
the jet
fuel.
fuel, yeah.
And so many flights are delayed, some are outrightly cancelled.
And airfares have gone up about 70, 100%. You know, I mean, and that was even since last week, even before now, you know, so it has a lot of spillover effects.
Something else also happening, of course, is that there are attempts to impose some kind of sanctions on individual Russians who are on crypto accounts.
Yeah. Well, that's another interesting one. This is one of the reasons why I think Nigerian government is very skeptical about cryptocurrency. So the regulators, like in the US, you know, they're well regulated. They've asked the platforms like Binance and all that who trade in crypto to impose or shut out, you know, Russians from there, but they have refused, saying that, well, number one, there's peer-to-peer. So, you know, even in Nigeria, when the government said you couldn't do it through the banks, I mean, trading is still going on. So it's a very decentralized system. So it's very difficult to actually, you know, tie it. So they have refused, because they know that the cryptocurrency owners and all that, they know that it will be very difficult to manage, because there's peer-to-peer, it's very decentralized. People can always go above whatever you put and still trade. Another interesting thing is, well, a lot of the cryptocurrencies have been boosting for some days now, because Russia being removed from SWIFT, so they cannot access, you know, the bank system and all that. they've been doing a lot of transactions, or individuals have been doing a lot of transactions through cryptocurrency. So apparently that has boosted prices there. Prices have been going up for some time now. Then also, even in Ukraine side, they are saying they want to do airdrop of Bitcoin. So they want to give money, Bitcoin to, and already they have, I think they have about over $30 million of Bitcoin already in donation.
Okay.
Yeah, that they say they want to give to their people, that is, they want to airdrop it. So people will just maybe create their wallet and make it available to the government, and then they'll be able to get it. So it seems investors in cryptocurrency may actually be seeing
some gains.
Yes,
would it be?
yes, looks like that.
Those are some gains. There's also, of course, the story that I talked about earlier, the 30% commission on foreign currency. You reported yesterday on this program and on your show that the ruble has fallen.
Yeah, about 30% now against the dollar.
Right. Now, so a lot of people are trying to head out.
Yes, you know, I actually saw a report yesterday. I mean, we only see this in Nigeria, mostly long queues at ATM in Russia. A lot of people are just trying to cash out, you know, and at least be liquid, have some liquid with them at this time. But of course, the international, the Western, I think the US and others are saying that they want to put a limit on Russia's reserve, you know, so that they would just, because everybody, for now, I think the ruble is about 110 against $1, and it used to be less than 1 before. So you can imagine what has happened
to it.
Yes, it's really, really lost value. So people are actually looking for a hedge at this time, and it seems they just want to go into dollar at least so that they can still have value for some of their money.
That's it does appear as if a lot of the impact that we're talking about will continue to unfold as the days go by. My last guest, of course, was talking about the fact that Russia has some economic sanctions it too can deploy.
Yes, imagine if they put off that gas. It's going to be, and you know, I mean, like here in Nigeria, we have a lot of warm weather. In the UK, it's really cold. A lot of European countries, it's really cold. So energy already in UK, for instance, by April, they're supposed to have, like, I think a 50% increase in their energy cost. So with this now, you can only imagine what, you know, people will go through. The energy cost is going to be so, so high. And also, I like to tease to say that in Business Incorporated, we're going to be talking more about this. The European Union has excluded 7 Russian banks from SWIFT. I mean, we've been talking about this. So now the EU, after the vote yesterday by the United Nations, you know, so they've excluded 7 Russian banks from SWIFT messaging. So it's more sanctions and more sanctions.
As each day goes by, you have more and more and more, and the repercussions are also more. Of course, all of this in more detail. This is just a teaser. All of this in more detail will be on our business shows later on. Immediately after this program is the first one. You've got Business Morning at 10, and then, of course, you have Business Incorporated, which signposted there at 1:30 later in the day. So to stay tuned for those if you want more of the details on how this could possibly affect you. Thank you so much, Ini.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States has made it clear to Ukraine that it will support Kiev's efforts at diplomacy with Russia, but that it was hard to see a diplomatic path without a military de-escalation. In a comment addressed to the Russian people, Mr. Blinken also told a news conference that the United States knew many of them wanted nothing to do with Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to invade neighboring Ukraine.
This is President Putin's war. This isn't the Russian people's war. It's becoming clearer by the day that the Russian people oppose it. Members of the Russian military oppose it and had no idea what they were being sent to do. And now the Russian people will suffer the consequences of their leaders' choices. So, my message to the people of Russia, if they're even able to hear it, as the Kremlin cracks down even harder on media outlets reporting the truth, my message is that we know many of you want no part of this war. You, like Ukrainians, like Americans, like people everywhere, want the same basic things. Good jobs, clean air and water, the chance to raise your kids in safe neighborhoods, to send them to good schools, to give them better lives than you had. How in the world does President Putin's unprovoked aggression against Ukraine help you achieve any of these things? How is it going to make your lives better? The economic costs that we've been forced to impose on Russia are not aimed at you. They're aimed at compelling your government to stop its actions, to stop its aggression. And just as millions of us around the world stand together against Moscow's aggression, we also stand together with you as you demand that your leaders end this war. If President Putin wants to demonstrate leadership, he should allow Russian soldiers to go home to their families. Finally, the United States is continuing our diplomatic efforts. We're keeping the door open to a diplomatic way forward. That's going to be very hard to happen without military de-escalation. It's much more difficult for diplomacy to succeed when guns are firing, tanks are rolling, planes are flying. But if Russia pulls back and pursues diplomacy, we stand ready to do the same thing.
In the meantime, the World Health Organization says it is concerned about reports of attacks on health facilities and on health workers. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General, stressed that attacks on healthcare are a violation of international law.
WHO is deeply concerned about the unfolding humanitarian emergency in Ukraine. WHO is on the ground, working with our partners to respond, to assess the impact of the conflict on the health of Ukraine's people and its health system, and to deliver essential medical supplies from our hub in Dubai. The first shipment will arrive in Poland tomorrow, including 36 metric tons of supplies for trauma care and emergency surgery to meet the needs of 1,000 patients, and other health supplies to meet the needs of 150,000 people. Prior to the conflict, WHO distributed emergency supplies to 23 hospitals, although our prepositioned supplies in Kiev are currently inaccessible. There is an urgent need to establish a corridor to ensure humanitarian workers and supplies have safe and continuous access to reach people in need. We are also deeply concerned about reports of attacks on health facilities and health workers. We have received several unconfirmed reports of attacks on hospitals and health infrastructure, and one confirmed incident last week in which a hospital came under heavy weapons attack, killing 4 people and injuring 10, including 6 health workers. We are currently in the process of verifying several other incidents. The sanctity and neutrality of healthcare, including of health workers, patients, supplies, transport, and facilities, and the right to safe access to care must be respected and protected. Attacks on healthcare are in violation of international humanitarian law.
Now, one of Ukraine's chief rabbis has called for prayers to end the Russian invasion and called on NATO leaders to take action to stop Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Rabbi Yakov Bleich, who spent 30 years living in Ukraine, helped create a Holocaust memorial in the capital, Kiev, for the victims of the Babnia World War II massacre of Jews in Ukraine by German occupation troops and Ukrainian auxiliaries.
The people in Russia are suffering. The Russian people in Ukraine are suffering. Everyone is suffering. He is creating a North Korea out of his country. That's what he's going to be, totally isolated. Which fascist country is supporting dozens of Jewish newspapers, television programs? Which fascist country is maintaining and helping and developing a thriving Jewish community with dozens of rabbis and hundreds of synagogues? Let me tell you something. Since Putin has become president of Russia, he has expelled 10 rabbis from Russia. In the 30 years that I am the chief rabbi of Ukraine, do you know how many rabbis have been expelled? 0, none, never, zilch. So who's the fascist? Who's the one that's the anti-Semite? Who's the one that is controlling people's minds? Who's the one that is controlling the mass media? Who's the one that shut off Facebook because he probably didn't want them to hear the truth that Zelensky was telling them? Who's the one that's controlling all of the media and controlling all of the civil society? If that's fascism, that's Putin. I don't buy that stuff. I don't buy into it. For this person, this evil person, who claims to be coming and bombing and killing indiscriminately civilians because he's trying to fight neo-fascism and fight neo-Nazism, the symbolism of that bomb being dropped in Babin Yar, I think, says everything.
Well, we've got another reaction from Ukraine, this time the ambassador to the United Nations, who's described yesterday's vote in the United Nations as a powerful message being sent to Russia after it censured Moscow for its invasion. The ambassador expressed his country's gratitude to those who voted in favor.
Now, people of Ukraine have more reasons to believe in the United Nations. It is just a beginning. Don't think that it was the end in itself or a purpose in itself, the vote. The vote is a powerful message to the Russian Federation. But I need to refer you to what I said in my statement as well. I still believe that there are citizens of the Russian Federation of dignity who unfortunately right now are cut from the information about how many Russian soldiers are killed in Ukraine. And as soon as they learn the magnitude of the tragedy, I hope they will stop the dictatorship in their country and the war is going to be over. The Security Council remains busy with Ukrainian issues, with the Russian crisis, and I call on you to call it Russian crisis. Stop calling it Ukrainian crisis. The only country that launched this crisis was Russian Federation. So the Security Council remains busy with issues, how to address like humanitarian problems. I express my sincere gratitude to all nations who have already came forward, offered assistance in money, goods, shelter.
The General Assembly has spoken. As Secretary General, it is my duty to stand by this resolution and be guided by its call. The message of the General Assembly is loud and clear. End hostilities in Ukraine now, silence the guns now, open the door to dialogue and diplomacy now. The territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine must be respected in line with UN Charter.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres speaking after the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations following yesterday's vote to censure Russia. We'll take a break at this point, and when we return, we're taking a look at sports and how this has affected or has been affected by the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Please stay with us.
It's an entertaining and engaging world of sports.
He steps up and it's a goal. Oh my, that's exciting.
That's why on Channel Sports, we got you covered with vivid coverage of breaking sports stories.
Played across.
Wait for the champion, Israel Adesanya.
So join us every weekday and on Sundays as we take you across the scintillating world of sports. It begins when news breaks, but there's much more in the details. That's where Special Report comes into the picture, locating the source and destination of the news.
Something needs to be done. We don't need to negotiate that. Government should see what we are doing.
Bringing your perspective to the fore.
If those arrested are those protesting against police brutality, I would say that such arrest is unjustified.
Exploring angles that may provide solutions. giving you the opportunity to understand the issues and make decisions. Watch Special Report on Channels Television. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Channels Television, ubiquitous.
Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Athletes from Russia and Belarus will not be allowed to compete at the 2022 Winter Paralympic Games in Beijing, China. The International Paralympic Committee was heavily criticized after initially allowing the athletes to compete as neutrals. But a statement this morning said the situation in the athletes' village had become untenable. IPC President Andrew Parsons described the athletes affected as victims of your government's actions. The Winter Paralympic Games begin on Saturday, with the opening ceremony taking place on Friday. Meanwhile, the IOC itself has not made a commitment to lift sanctions on Russia in case of a ceasefire or peace deal following its invasion of the Ukraine. The IOC recommended that sports organizations should not allow the participation of Russian and Belarusian athletes and officials in international competitions. And the announcement led to a host of sports announcing such sanctions, including FIFA and UEFA, which suspended Russian national teams and clubs from international football.
Very difficult to either to set a deadline or to define an event. What could either lead to heavier sanctions or what could lead to a lifting of some of the sanctions. This is why you find in general terms the formula that we are keeping to closely monitor the situation and will adapt then depending on the further developments.
Roman Abramovich's decision to put Chelsea up for sale has been greeted with dismay by some Chelsea fans. Mr. Abramovich confirmed yesterday that he is selling Chelsea Football Club, with all net proceeds from the sale to be donated to victims of the war in Ukraine. This is on the back of growing calls for him to be sanctioned after Russia's invasion of that country. Abramovich is owed £1.5 billion by Chelsea after buying the club for £140 million in 2003, but says he will not ask for any of the loans to be repaid.
I mean, it's deep news. 22 years in the making of a Russian owner who's done bits for a club who I love, and it's a sad day to see him go. You know what I mean? What's happening at the moment is not ideal. Poor guy, you know, he's been involved for this long, and for this matter, you know, unfortunately for his point of view, he's pulled out. But as a club, what he's done for us, absolutely quality, love it. And, you know, in my own heart, he's going to always stay there, always stay there.
It's really a shame because Abramovich has brought success to Chelsea. We won everything. We're the champions of the world, we're champions of Europe, and it's a shame actually what's happening in Ukraine. And others, like Roman Abramovich, has to pay the price, including all the supporters.
Joining me now is Sports Administrator Yomi Kuku, who is in Abuja. Nice to see you, Yomi, although the circumstances are not exactly auspicious. Glad to have you on the program.
Hello, Ladi.
All right. Let me quickly ask you. I can hear you. I can hear you, Yomi. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. Very well.
What do you make of all these bans of athletes and from international competitions? Because as the sports bodies have said, they are government's actions.
For the first time, we're seeing an unprecedented approach from sports federations which is directly thrusted into the heart of politics. And that absolutely negates the neutrality signatures of countries who are part of sports federations all over the world. And no one can pretend that Putin has done the right thing. And we all cannot also pretend that this is not the first time we're seeing countries being invaded by a superior power. We cannot also pretend that we don't know what transpired right from the beginning, the invasion of Ukraine, and this thing dating back to the 60s, the 50s. We also know very well that this is a clash of ideologies. You know, two superpowers fighting a proxy war in Ukraine. But what is most concerning is the fact that for the first time, we're seeing sports federations going directly at a supposed aggressor. So when you do that, you're laying a precedent in such a way that makes it mandatory for those sports federations to intervene at every point in time that a country is supposedly aggressed or a country is invaded. But then, for some of us, the question we're asking is, we witnessed the fact that Saudi Arabia and some countries invaded Yemen. What actions were taken? That's the first question. We also see the conflict between Palestinians and Israel, the great, the sufferings that we've seen people go through during such conflicts. We also know very well that there was also a time a supposed weapons of mass destruction was alleged on a country and there was a massive invasion. Those countries who participated in that, were they sanctioned? So if that was in the past, and we're talking about the present, so it means that FIFA and other sports federations have set a precedent that is going to be massively weighed on the future alliances in world sport. And for me personally, I don't think this is right, because again, they are shutting down all opportunities for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. Everybody is heated up. It's getting extremely emotional. Now we're close to the Third World War, right? So we're saying the First World War was started all the way from Europe, the second the same. And now we're at another brink. So I think that it's basically a wrong move to have decided to totally shut out the Russian athletes, the Russian federations, and also the Belarusians from sports activities. This needed to be weighed. They're getting so confrontational in such a way that we're beginning to they're beginning to make it look like it's a victimization of a collective punishment they've always been, clamoring. You can't do that. And I do not agree to that. And I think sports federations should not have done that. That was wrong, totally wrong. And there are other ways to intervene and to bring in, most especially, I'll tell you something, a lot of the Russians, a lot of them would not agree with what Putin has done. So you're punishing them for what Putin has done as well. And you're also punishing those who are also neutral, and also punishing those who feel that Putin is doing the right thing. So it's a collective punishment, which I don't think is right. And this is unprecedented. It's a bad precedent they're setting. So we'll be looking forward to a FIFA saying, an Israeli Hamas conflict happens now, so they want to sanction Israel. Saudi Arabia continues to attack Yemen, so they want to sanction Saudi Arabia. And maybe, who knows, China wakes up tomorrow and attacks Taiwan, they're also going to sanction China. Nigeria.
It does seem as if Yomi's network frozen. Okay, it seems as if he's back.
Yes.
Please go on, Yomi. You were frozen for a bit there.
Oh, the network was frozen, not me.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, your network was frozen for a bit there. Please go on.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the sports federations, international sports federation, cannot take the position of being an active player in this conflict. They needed to continue being an arbiter. The neutrality charter, which every federation, every country was signatory to, they should have maintained that. And they should have been able to use sports as an avenue to bring in the warring factions. I was watching some of the highlights from the Winter Games, and I saw a Ukrainian athlete embracing a Russian athlete. Who says that those are not the things that could bring these people together? We've also seen Olympic truce being observed at different times with warring factions. So what we're saying is that, thrusting sports right into the heart of it, and taking sides, it's not good. What you want to freeze out Russia totally, and then you are also freezing out the opportunities for conflict resolution.
Indeed, Yomi, there are quite a lot of people who have taken the position that you've taken and who talk about precedents being set and the fact that in the future this might be something that people would make reference to as the time when sports was brought into politics. I want to thank you for your time on the program this morning. Do enjoy the rest of your stay in Abuja at this point in time. Thank you, Yomi, for your time.
Thank you, Laddie. My pleasure.
And just before we go, it's a happy reunion for hundreds of refugees that have been arriving in Berlin's central station from the Polish-Ukrainian border. Trains coming in from Poland have been arriving in the German capital over several days as the Russian invasion of Ukraine intensifies and draws closer to Kiev. Numbers of incoming refugees have been increasing daily, with volunteer organizations now providing a fully organized reception area on the lower levels of the station.
Clear from the platform and the area of the stairs. Please leave the...
Well, first of all, because all our families are still in Ukraine and we cannot just sit at home and just look at the news. So I feel huge responsibility to help my family because, I mean, I studied in Germany. I had the luck to get scholarship here and now I'm working here. So I mean, it's my country, it's my people, it's my family. This is impossible to sit at home. I have to help. So yeah, on the right side, there's like thousands of people from Berlin offering place to stay. This is absolutely incredible. You just like enter the building and there are like thousands of people actually supporting, like, and they say they have like saying on the paper in Ukrainian, in English, in Russian. Amazing.
Yes, a lot of bombs and many explorers and I was very scared and I had to get out from this hell and now I'm here. I hope I'm in a safe place.
Yeah, the situation was very difficult because they were only evacuating women and children. So me as I'm a man, I was not allowed to enter in the train or in the bus, so I had to walk about 30 kilometers on foot to access the border. Then from there, hopefully, thanks to God, I was able to make it in Poland. Yeah, it was very stressful. I had like some injuries. I was so tired because I remember the temperature was -3 degrees. Yeah, we had to walk 30 kilometers with a temperature of -3 degrees, so it was really horrible. So we need to take a rest, we need to chill a little bit and see what's next.
And speaking of successful evacuations, later on today, reports have it that the first evacuation flight from the neighboring countries bringing Nigerians back to Nigeria is expected today. We'll be keeping a very close eye on that and reporting it as it happens to you. There will be, of course, another edition of this program at 5 o'clock this evening. That's when you should expect to see some information, some news on those evacuations. And there'll be another show tomorrow at 9 in the morning. I'm Ladi Akiridulwale. Thanks for being with us.